Hey everyone, Bruce here with another video on graphics. Now, let me just say one thing. I've created a new file here in my Chapter 4 folder on my desktop called Shapes, because we're going to learn about drawing shapes on a graphics window. And I added my from graphics import star statement. I defined a function called shapes, and in there I put my statement to draw or initiate the graphics window, and I called it shades. I'm going to call it shapes here, okay? And then I called the shapes function, okay? So what I want to teach you here is I want to go through drawing. Let's start with a circle, okay? Let's start with a red circle whose center is at the, let's see, I don't know, 100, 100, and it has a radius of 30, okay? So let me just write this down as a comment. Draw a circle that has center point, right, of the circle at, I'll write it here, xy, 100, okay, 100, with a radius of 30. So how do we do this? Okay. Well, when you draw a circle using the graphics library, in fact, I'm going to find this right now in my textbook. I'm going to tell you where you need to start bookmarking your book. Okay, and that's page 108. 108. That's section 4.8.1. It's called GraphWin Objects. Okay, those are all the quote-unquote objects that the graphics library has. Okay, so the first thing when you draw a circle, right, is don't type this right like this, but notice I'm just showing you here. It says center and radius. Okay, those are the two parameters that the circle function, right, needs. Okay, so it needs a center and a radius. Okay, so let's draw a circle, and let me show you how to do it. The first thing we want to do is define a variable called center. Okay, and like the circle object said, right, it needs to have a center point. Okay, and if you remember in the last video, we're able to create points, right, using xy coordinates like this, and we said we wanted this circle to have a center point of 100. So now this variable center right here, okay, is actually a point. Okay, it's not just like we've done in the past, right? The number 42, the I like turtles string, or something like that. It's actually a point. Okay, now what we need to do at this point is say, hey, let's draw our circle. Okay, well, let's create a circle object. Okay, remember from the video on points that you create the object first and then you draw the object on the window. Okay, so circ is our variable name. Okay, and we are going to say, hey, look on page 108, I think, of the book, and it says, what is the center point of your circle? And we define that as a variable called center. And then above we said we wanted to have a radius of 30. Okay, so let's do that for a second. We are eventually going to make this circle red. But what we need to do now in order to draw it is to take the circle, there it is, CIRC, dot draw, and then draw it on the graphics window, right, that we created above. Win is the variable that points to that object. Okay, so I'm starting to use a lot of big words here, but you got to read through. Okay, chapter 4. Oh, good, I have an error because I have an extra colon. So I don't have you in the comfort of my home here telling me that I made a typo. So there you go. Thank you. So there it is. There is a lovely circle at 100, 100, because remember the size of this window is 400 by 400. And the center point here is 100, 100. How about that? Congratulations. So let me stick that code up there, because I know someone's going to ask. So there it is. You can pause the video now to make sure you get the circle drawn. And what I want to do actually before we draw the circle, right above where we draw it, I'm going to say, hey circle, object, there you are. I'm going to say, I'm going to look on page 108 and flip through the pages there. How do I set the fill of the circle? And that's using something called set fill. Okay, and I am going to put in here red because that's what it's expecting. And I'll show you can change that to blue, yellow, or other colors. And I'm going to run this now. And we have a beautiful red circle. That is one of the best looking red circles that I've ever seen. So there is the circle. So let me move this here so you can see what's going on here. Let me minimize this window. So there is our friend, the circle. Okay, let me go over it again. So we created our window object right here. We then created a center point where we wanted our circle to be centered at. We then used our circle object and we said we want the center of it to be at this point right here. And then we gave it a radius of 30. We set the fill to red, and then we took the circle and we called its draw method, and we drew it on the window, and then we finally called shapes, which ran all this code here. Okay, just to show you here, if I change this to blue, okay, and I run it, run, there is a beautiful blue circle. Okay, so I want you to know how to draw circles. Okay, now one last point. I did create this variable here called center, and I gave it a point here. But I could just as well take this point here, copy it, change this from a variable to point just like that. So I can stick the point creation right inside the call to circle here. And if I run this, we should have our blue circle, right? There it is. Okay, there is our lovely blue circle. And just so you can experiment a little, if I make this a 200, right, I'm going to make the radius 200. Watch what happens. So now the circle is partly on the screen, right, on the canvas here, on the window, and it's partly off, so you can't see it here. So I'll leave the code here. I want you to play around. Again, you need to learn how to do this on your own. And if you have any questions, catch me on Slack.